This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. In this video, we're making a camellia wreath cake design. It's broken down into steps, so you can skip ahead, rewind, and rewatch as desired. We're going to make our several colors for our camellia style wreath cake, and we're going to use the following liquid gel colors to do so: Buckeye Brown, Royal Blue, some neon bright pink, lemon yellow, red, and finally some sunset orange. We're going to be making some peachy shades along with some greens to make our camellias today and our background colors, but we're going to start with a yellow for some centers, and I've got a little yellow and some sunset orange out here, and I just want to make a nice yellow, maybe give it a bit of that kind of richer egg vibe, just add a little bit of that orange. We just want a nice little yellow there. Maybe not too bright and lemony, so I just added a little bit of that orange. You could always do things like add a little red, add a little brown, if you don't want it to be that nice true yellow and you want to give it a slightly different vibe. I like where this is going. I'm just going to add a tiny speck more of that orange. It's giving me the feel of kind of like whipped up egg yolks if I'm making nice little egg foam. So that's going to be lovely in the centers for us. Next, we're going to make a lighter shade of peach. I've got some more buttercream in my bowl. I'm going to use a little orange, a little neon bright pink, and a little red for this. I just don't want to do too much color. Just a little bit of that red. I don't want it to be too dark. Beautiful. For our next color, we're going to make a darker shade of peach. So same colors again, just more of them, especially since we have more buttercream. So I'm just going to start out with several big specks of each, mix it around, and I just want to make sure that it's dark enough, that it's different enough from the one that we made before, that they stand out when they're next to each other. So give this a mix around and add more color as needed. Just do a nice mix of orange and pink, and then a little touch of red each time. And I think we're getting there. It's definitely more color to it than that first shade. I think I just want to bring it just a little further apart, just make it a little different, just to make sure that they kind of stand out and read next to each other. And this one definitely looks darker. I've got my other color just off to the side so I can see them next to each other, and this is looking good. I think I just want to give it a tiny touch more of my red. Beautiful. We have a nice, rich, lovely shade of peach. It's darker than the first one we made, but it's still not what I would call a super saturated color. It's still pretty, I would say, in that kind of light to medium range, just on the border between the two. For our next color, we're going to make a lighter shade of green. So I've got a little of my blue and brown out as well, and I'm going to just start with some yellow. I use that yellow first, so if I need to, I'll get a little more out for myself. But I just want to make a nice light shade, heavier on the yellow than on the blue. Tiny touch of that brown. There you see, that gives us a beautiful kind of spring green shade that has a bit of that earthy vibe to it. Our final color is going to be a darker green, and for this one, we're making quite a bit. We're going to do quite a few leaves, and I'm going to start with drops. I want it to be on the intense side. A lot of the other colors we've made are more so pastels, maybe a medium tone at the best. And I just want to repeat by putting a little bit of that brown in there to give it that kind of same earthy tone, so it'll kind of go with our other green. And this should give us a nice contrast to those soft, beautiful peach shades and the yellow that we made. I just want it to be nice and rich. Just add more color as you need to and get it to where you want it to be. There we go. I think that's going to be lovely. Just gave it that same kind of touch of brown to give it that same kind of earthy vibe where it's not too vibrant. It just mutes it just a tiny touch. And that's going to be a beautiful shade against those lovely peaches that we're going to use for our flowers. We're going to use 4 bags. Each of them has the tip directly in it. We're using all 12-inch disposable, but you can use whatever you like and whatever you have on hand. Our first has our yellow in it, and we've got a number 3 tip on this bag. Our next bag is loaded with our dark green, and we're using a 125. We have a bag with just our darker shade of peach in it, and we're using a 122. And finally, we have a bag with a 123 that's striped. We have a nice video on bag striping if you haven't already watched it. This one is a 2-color. We've loaded up our lighter peach shade lined up with the top of the tip, so that skinny end, and you can see it's taking up most of that area, like about 2/3. And then that bottom third is our darker shade of peach. And this is going to give us a nice striped effect on our petal where we have the lighter color on top and the darker one down at the base. We're going to review the techniques that we're going to use on this camellia cake. And if you want a full detailed lesson on camellias, check out the flower series video that we did on them. It's got a nice introduction to them if you haven't already watched them. This one we're just doing a little light review. For our mounds, we're going to do a little squeeze to get ourselves started. And then we're going to set ourselves up so the tip cups that little buildup of frosting and spin while we squeeze on our nail. This is going to give us a nice little round mounded center for us to build off of. Our petals on this one are a nice soft arc shape. We kind of start angled with the back of the bag towards noon to begin with, especially on our bottom rows, and pull around as we spin our nail. And that gives us a nice soft arc shape. And the main thing on these is that we're going to start out with the tip almost flat, and we're going to rotate it as we go and we make rows of petals to make them stand up on end. We're going to use spikes for our stamens. We're using our number 3 tip. If you don't have a 3, you can also use a 4. But we're going to be going on top of the mound we created and just start in the center with 1. Pull up while we squeeze, so just a little off the surface, let it build and make a dot, and then pull up while still applying pressure. And this is going to give you nice, beautiful little frilly stamens in the middle of your flowers. For our buds, we're going to start out by making just a little ribbon base. And to do this, we're just going to take the tip and just wiggle it back and forth on top of itself just to make these little layers. And it kind of reminds me of like folded up fabric or something like that. Think about folding up your bath towels. We're just layering it on top of each other 3 to 4 times to start building up a base for ourselves. For our buds, we're going to use a wriggle center. So for this, we're going to set ourselves up so that the skinny end of the tip is kind of pointing across towards 11 o'clock. The fat end of the base is going to rest kind of on this little mound. My bag is at 45 degrees and 430, so the back end is pointing towards my shoulder. And we're just going to set ourselves up on our nail so that as soon as we start squeezing, we're going to turn as we just move up and down a little bit. So the bag stays in place and is just moving up and down vertically. And this is going to give us these little wriggles or almost like folds of frosting. They're going to look like tightly closed centers. For the petals, to finish off our little buds, we're going to do little high arcs. So think just like the soft arc, but we're going to make it taller and shorter. So traveling less distance horizontally, but going up more vertically. For our leaves, we're going to do some nice basic flat ones. So we're using our 125 tip. We're going to squeeze as we pull up, hit that point, and then we'll rotate our nail, rotate our hand if we're working directly on our cake, and we will pull back down. And that's going to give us a nice broad flat leaf with just a little point on the end. The other style we're going to use on this are just going to be our nice ruffle leaves. So you want to think about drawing little loops with the end of that tip. So just out and back and out. And that'll be easier to do on our cake where we can rotate our turntable. We're going to get started by piping some buds, and we're probably going to use 6 of these in our design. So you want to give yourself at least 6 or 7 of these. Go ahead and pipe them, get them on a tray, and chill them so they're ready to use. And we're going to start with our little ribbon base. So think bag is straight up and down, and I just want to go about 3/4 of an inch back and forth, probably about 4 times. So just layering that up, and you can see it makes a nice little mount for us. I've changed the orientation of my bag, so I'm now at 45 degrees. Back end is at 430, so pointing towards my right shoulder because I'm right-handed, and you can see the tip is lined up at that angle, so that pointy end is pointing over towards 11 o'clock if I'm imagining a clock face. And I'm just going to start piping while I turn, wriggling up and down, just keeping that tip in place, and you can see it makes a nice, beautiful, closed center for us. And it gives us that look like tightly closed petals that are kind of coiled up in there and is really just a beautiful little effect. Now we're at our little high arc petals. I'm just going to do 3 of those. Kind of equally spaced there apart. And then I'm going to go back and do 3 more just right over the gaps between them. And that gives us a beautiful bud. Now we're going to pipe our camellias. I'm going to start with just a nice little squeeze of frosting with that bag straight up and down. And then I'm going to change to my 45 and 430 position. Give myself a nice spin. You can go around twice. You can see it kind of builds up that little center. It gives us a nice mass to work from. I've got my tip so the opening is almost flat, which isn't totally possible with this tip because it's curved, but you want to think about the middle touching. And we're going to kind of start out touching the center, pulling in a nice soft arc. So you can see we've got a nice curve and it curves up on that edge. And it's going to give us the perfect opportunity then to start our next petal under the one before. And you can see there's a little bit of space between my petals and my center, and that is just fine. I just want to start kind of facing back and curving around. That's perfectly fine if you knock into things just a little bit. You just want to leave your space to come in there and on top. So it usually takes about 5 petals for that first row, and that last one is going to overlap the first one quite a bit. To start your second row, just take your tip, rotate it a little bit, so instead of being flat, it's more like 45 degrees, and we're going to do that same action. Start underneath and curve as we pull. And it might only take you 4 to get around. That's just fine. If you need to, pop a 5th one in there to cover up that area. And then for our third row, we're going to take it and we're going to point it so the tip is almost straight up and down. Think overall orientation, so that end kind of curves inward. And just pull really, really short petals. And it'll probably take about 3. Make them overlap if you need to. And that makes a beautiful kind of enclosed center with those lovely cupped petals that kind of curve towards the middle for us. Now to finish things off, we just have to cover that center mound. You can see it there in the middle. Just start in the center. Turn your nail as you need to get a good view. And just go in there with your yellow and pull nice, long, frilly spikes, and just be careful of your little petals. You want to make sure that you don't damage those. So just go in, if you need to, tilt the bag at a bit of an angle to make contact without disturbing the beautiful work you've already done. And they can be short and kind of down in there, or you can make it so they kind of come up past the top, but you can see that gives us a beautiful camellia blossom. We're probably going to use 3 of these big open blossoms, so I'm going to go ahead and finish piping those now, get them on a tray so I can chill them in the refrigerator so they're nice and firm and easy to place on my cake. And finally, for advanced piping, we're going to go ahead and pipe some leaves. So we're going to do this ahead of time before we work on our actual cake and just get these chilled for us. You probably want 6 of these big boys, and we're doing our nice basic flat ones. So I want to start at the base of my nail, pull up, turn and rotate to a point, and then pull back. So I'm going to get like 6 of these ready, think 2 for each full blossom, and then I'm going to save my bag and I'm going to pipe directly on my cake as well. But I want some big, neat, fat ones to kind of play with. They're nice and chilled and firm, and to go in any places where it might be hard for me to get in at a good angle and pipe. So you can kind of have these ready ahead of time. And as you're going, if you find it hard to pipe directly on the cake, you can always pipe more in advance as well. We're going to cover our cake, and we are going to use our nice light green that we made to do that. So I just want to get a nice little blob of that on top of my chilled cake. And in case you're wondering, it's a 6-inch round. It's 2 1.5-inch layers that we've leveled off and filled between with some buttercream. And we've given it a nice crumb coat and a smooth layer of white. And now I'm just laying on this light green. And I like doing it this way because I use less food coloring, which is great for a lot of reasons, including cost, and also, a lot like fondant, allows people to eat around it if they don't want to eat all that food coloring. Because let's face it, a lot of times when we're eating a pretty cake, it's for a special occasion and there's pictures. And nobody wants to find out they smiled and have like purple or green teeth or colored tongues, etc. So we're just doing a nice light layer of our green. It shouldn't take too much because we're just going on really nice and thin. And if you get this on and you have some extra green, we can use it to do our little ring to help create depth and dimension in our ring, or we can load it into our bag of green when we're piping if we start to run out to make some varied colors on our leaves as well. So if you have a little extra of your light green, don't worry, we'll go ahead and use that up in another way in just a little bit. So I'm just going to get it on there nice and smooth with that spatula and give it a quick pass with my bowl scraper. That'll help press anything into any depressions. And then my bench scraper just to kind of straighten everything out. And if you've done this before, one pass may be all you need. If you've never given it a try, make sure you start with a really solid, firm cake. Let that butter be really hard because it'll help you out. And it might only take you one pass and just a little bit of buttercream to lay on a color like this. But if you need more than one, just let it chill for a few more minutes and then go in and cover any areas where you have thin spots, any bold spots or unevenness. But you can see that gave me a nice light, even layer of color. And we're going to chill it up probably 10-15 minutes so it's nice and firm, easy to work on, and I don't destroy any of the pretty work I've already done when I start placing my blossoms. We're getting ready to place our decorations on our cake, and the first thing we want to do is pipe ourselves a little bit of a support ring here. This is going to allow us to kind of angle and tilt our flowers out and to the side and give our wreath a little dimension. And for this, I'm just using a bag that I already had on hand with some green that I already had on hand. And the important part about these rings is they're going to get covered up completely, so it doesn't really matter what color they are. So if you have extra light green, extra peach, extra colors from this project, or maybe you have some leftover buttercream from another project, you can use that. If you don't have any of those, just use some white. And you can put it in a bag and just cut the end so you have a nice big hole for yourself. You don't even need to use a tip. I'm going to come in from that outside edge just about an inch, inch and a half, and just pipe a nice ring for myself. So just nice, steady, firm pressure. This is a great way for me to use up my excess buttercream and also make sure those flowers are supported. So you can just stand still, pipe, give it a squeeze and a turn of your turntable, and that'll take care of that step for you. We're going to continue prepping our area, and I'm going to grab my bag with my 125 and pipe some leaves. And I'm just going to use my turntable to help me get them on there. So I'm just going to go in all directions. With these. You can see I'm going to leave some little space for a bud right there. When I've got a little area prepared, I'm just going to go ahead, give myself a little extra buttercream, and place one of my buds. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to leave myself a nice void in there. Think about the size of your camellias and make sure you leave a big gap. And I'm just going to prepare this area a little bit. Make some little leaves coming out so that they'll stick out from underneath my camellia. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did over here and pipe some space, some little leaves in this space for a second little bud. So we want to think about just kind of preparing the area, getting some nice coverage there, making some little beautiful leaves for ourselves, and then placing a little bud as well. And I can go in and put some little sepals on the back end, but we just want some facing out and some facing in. I'm going to come in here and just make sure I've got a nice surface prepped for my camellia. And I'm going to put on two of my leaves that I had prepared ahead of time. So I'm just going to peel those off my paper. I'm going to think about giving it a little depth and dimension. These are really big, and you can see they're holding their shape. And we can use them to really create some drama on top of the ones that we piped down there. And that should leave us with a nice space in the middle. You need a little extra buttercream to go in and place your big camellia blossoms. So just, if you need to, use your spatula, just kind of twist things, tweak them until you get that down in there. And it should have a nice little support. And if you need to, you can move stuff around because it should all be nice and firm for you. I'm going to start working on the other side of my cake. So you want to imagine nice big space in here for another camellia and over on this side because we've got 3 of those big ones. So we want to put a bud in here. And so we just want to put on some leaves for that. So think about drawing down and up. If it's a little easier, you can also do those great ruffle leaves. So if you have trouble with these flat basic ones, don't be afraid to put some little ruffles in. Those might be a little easier for you. If you start running out of green, you can always make some more. You can load any excess yellow or light green you had in there. And this is also a good opportunity to come in on the back side of that camellia and make sure that it's nice and supported and you've got enough frosting in there. So this is going to be a good spot for a bud. I just want to come in and think about where my little camellias are and put down some greenery in those spaces as well. So I want to think about making things nice and supported and kind of varying up the types of leaves that we've got going on, making some peek down over the edges and just kind of preparing these little areas for myself now that I kind of have a better idea of my spacing and what's going on. So then we'll just come in here and do the same thing. Nice and big. Some of them ruffling, some of them pointed. And some of them going in all different directions. So now I have this kind of beautiful greenery going all around my cake. I can pull out some more buds and my blossoms and start placing those. We're going to keep working with our beautiful project, and I'm going to just place a bud right here so we're facing out towards the viewer. And I'm going to just sneak in here. Well, I've still got a good open area. I'm just going to place one behind. So I want to make sure everything's kind of supported and makes sense because that flower has quite a bit of tilt to it. So I just want to sneak down in there, and that's a great way to see, kind of fill in that area for the viewer when they're viewing from the other side and make sure that big blossom is nice and supported. And now that I've got that going on, I'm going to take a few of my other large leaves that I've piped, and I'm just going to make sure there's a little fresh buttercream for them to stick to. And I'm going to come in here and make some of those little high drama points that kind of cross and go back and make nice little resting spots for my large blossoms. And not all of our camellias have to necessarily face out towards the viewer. Some of them can be a little more flat. That way you don't have to worry about getting anything back in there. And you could even, especially if you're working on a larger cake, tilt some of them in. That's really up to you, and it's going to be kind of a personal design choice. And just make sure we have a nice little spot there. It's okay for things to drape over the side. Feel free to get kind of dramatic with it and do whatever works well for you. I'm just looking at this last little area and seeing if I need to put anything in there. Sometimes these are the toughest decisions. Think maybe going out that way across that one. I've got a nice one that curves in the right direction. That'll give me a nice big spot for my last blossom in there. Little buttercream. And if you haven't been seeing that, the papers just peel right off when they're nice and chilled. So you don't have to really worry about messing up your flowers. And then I'm just going to look at it from all angles, make sure I like what's going on, see if I need to put anything else on there. or if I have room for anything else. Let's see. I might want to try and sneak a little bud down in there just to get a little balance for myself in terms of the colors and the way things look. And I've got a nice small petite one, so I think it's just going to come right in there and nest. Oh, that's going to be beautiful. Right on that. And we're looking gorgeous. And I have just a tiny little break in one of my leaves, which isn't a big deal, but I can just cover it up with a nice little ruffle leaf. And there you can see we have a beautiful, full, vibrant camellia wreath cake. That's all for this camellia wreath cake lesson. If you enjoyed this one and you want to check out some other designs, maybe try checking out our 3D camellia cake. Or if you're looking for just some simple flowers to practice, try giving our lesson on buttercream dahlias a go. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.